Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I'm Saladino.
We shall never find that lovely land of might have been. I can never be your king, nor you can be my queen.
Representation is not about inclusion and diversity or letting marginalized people see themselves. Representation is about censorship and control and pushing a gender abolitionist ideology down everyone's throats. Pronouns aren't about the trans community. Pronouns are from the sociopaths who identify as non-binary. And not to say that everyone who calls themselves non-binary is this hateful, harmful person, but non-binary is not a thing. Like I keep saying, non-binary are the furries of the LGBTQ community. It's not a sexual orientation. It's not a dysphoria. It's just people with a mental illness, and it could be autism, OCD, anxiety, who have decided to make it about gender, to make whatever condition they have, whatever feelings that they have, or confusion that they have, not even sexual orientation confusion, just this mental anxiety and instability. They've decided to make that gender. Nobody feels like a man or a woman. That's not a thing. You can feel sexual attraction. You can have emotions and emotional responses typical of male and female biology, but likely more typical of societal expectations. But that doesn't mean you feel like a man or a woman, and it doesn't mean that if you are a man who likes Barbie, you're a woman. Or if you're a woman who likes G.I. Joe, you're actually a man. That this nonsense is in gaming, a space predominantly made up of straight men, is absurd. Body type 1 and 2, body type A and B, pronouns, all this shit has nothing to do with the largest part of society. Most people, 99% of the world, even the LGB ones, do not have dysphoria and are not obsessed with this idea that gender is a spectrum and that there's no difference between men and women, and that you can be a man one day and then a woman the other. This is a thing for people with too much time on their hands and too up their own asses to get into a hobby. Like I always say, activists who get into comics or gaming are not getting into it because they care about comics or games. They get into it because their actual hobby is activism, and activism is primarily there to destroy their political enemies. And the political enemy of most activists are straight white men. They don't want straight white men to have their hobbies, to have their safe spaces, to have a space of their own. They always have to be a part of it so that they can destroy it. And if you want to get really tinfoil hat about it, I think feminism and alphabet activists are part of a sinister plot to keep people fighting amongst themselves so that the people up top can continue to exploit us. There is no reason in the world to go this hard and push so much for people who say they're not the sex they are born with, not assigned with. You're not assigned a gender when you're born. All you have to do is look at your pee-pee or your coochie and say, okay, this is a male, this is a female. This thing about gender being a social construct is nonsense. It's just an out. It's just a way to weaponize how someone wants to feel and how they want to be perceived in the world and to gain power from that. Games, comics, sports should not be changed as much as they have been just to accommodate people who think that there's something they're not. In no other instance would that be allowed. Nobody who's white can say, I'm actually black, and be allowed to get away with that in society. Does it mean that someone who's trans, for instance, should be banned from society or that they shouldn't be allowed jobs? Although you need to seriously vet them before letting them work in games or comics these days. I mean, look at something like Dragon Age: The Veilguard. That was directed by a trans woman, and look how that's turned out. But they should be allowed to have homes. They should be allowed to exist in society without harm if they're not harming anyone else. But this idea that we have to have body type 1 and body type 2 in a video game because some people don't believe in objective reality is bullshit. And I think it's done to piss people off. And again, tinfoil hat time. They do it to hope some lone wolf type does something extreme in society. They want the incel, the straight white incel, to go out in society and do something so that they can come up with more ways, they being them, the man, they can come up with more ways to scare people into giving up more of their rights and to distract them from the real oppression, the real exploitation in society. This whole thing where you have these assholes that hate games and comics and they hate the actual comic fans and gamers, and so they sneeringly call those of us who speak out against feminism and activism and LGBTQ agenda and our hobbies anti-woke. This thing when they go, you're anti-woke. Like woke is good is classic gaslighting. Woke isn't good, and woke isn't the default. The default is art and entertainment made to express the artist's feelings, desires, interests. The default is to entertain, to distract, ultimately to allow you to tolerate yourself and your existence. There are works out there that will help you change the way you see things and perhaps inspire you to change the world in some big ways or small ways, depending on who you are, who you've been throughout history. But ultimately, more than anything, with art, is to help you be better alone with your own thoughts. Everything that activists claim they want in art and entertainment is already there, but not as representation. The problem with representation is that, and I've said this before, once you start buying into it and enabling this stupid, moronic notion that people need to see themselves in art and entertainment, you're suddenly limited to what you can do as an artist or entertainer. Like, again, I always say, the best argument against diversity and inclusion, against representation, are the people who push for it. If you want to make a story about a serial killer, for instance, you can't make the victims black, because sociopaths online will call you racist for hurting black people. If you want to make the lead hero of an action movie trans, you can't have any tension or any real stakes because you can't hurt the trans hero without people online calling you transphobic. So you can't have a story where the trans hero is being put through trials and tribulations, physically hurt, physically attacked, insulted, called slurs, interrogated on their trans existence and trans identity. You can't have those things that normal stories with normal people in it can have. Because, again, people online will say you are trying to hurt trans people. You're trying to denigrate them by having a character misgender them or dead name them. Stupid stuff like that. The whole damsels in distress thing is literally a bunch of stupid feminists complaining about women being victims in fiction, somehow having an impact on women and girls in real life. Who gives a shit how many times Princess Peach is kidnapped in a video game? What does that have to do with real life? How many girls playing a Mario game are thinking to themselves, oh my god, Nintendo thinks women keep getting kidnapped. They hate me. Representation is a grift. They call all of us anti-woke gamers and YouTubers grifters for speaking out against the things we like, being corrupted by mentally ill people who literally want to destroy our hobbies. But the irony is, the people who hate us are the real grifters. They're the ones conflating trans people who simply identify as the opposite sex with non-binary, who are making a show of pronouns and body types and pretending that it's transphobia to tell them to fuck off. They're the ones in spaces they don't care about, acting like their political agenda is meant to improve games and make it more welcoming to so-called marginalized people, when in reality, they're only in the space to destroy it. And they're cynically using trans women, not trans men. They really don't care about trans men because trans men aren't a threat to anybody the way these fake trans women invading women's spaces are. But they're cynically using these trans people as a shield for their gender abolition. Like I say, and other people have said, trans people recognize the difference between men and women. That's why they are trans and identify as either men or women. Notice they're not called trans A or trans B. Non-binary is not a dysphoria. Non-binary is an ideology, and having your ideology shoved down everyone's throats is not a human right. People are not bigots for rejecting it, and you're not a victim because people acknowledge objective reality. You don't want representation. You want propaganda.
Pools of shimmering call and I can be all you ask of me. flowers for a king, all these I bring to you.